In a city where money could buy almost anything, except time, a dying girl's life was fading in a hospital of power and privilege. But when a poor street boy, armed only with his grandmother's forgotten wisdom, crossed paths with her, the truth he uncovered would shake the entire medical world. Rain poured down over the towering glass walls of St. Matthew's Medical Center, the city's most advanced hospital, where money was supposed to buy miracles. But that night, even the sound of thunder couldn't drown the quiet heartbreak echoing inside one of its top floors. Victoria Langford, the elegant heiress of the Langford pharmaceutical empire, stood frozen beside her daughter's hospital bed. Her 7-year-old Emily lay still beneath layers of wires and monitors, her tiny frame dwarfed by the machinery meant to keep her alive. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sign that life still clung to her small, fragile body. Victoria's world, once full of power, control, and prestige, had narrowed to the flicker of those digital lines. And now even that light was fading. Dr. Samuel Price, the hospital's chief specialist and the face of modern medical science, stood across from her with the practiced calm of a man who had delivered impossible news before. But his eyes carried a hint of fear. Fear not of death, but of failure. "Mrs. Langford," he said, keeping his tone flat, almost rehearsed. "We've done everything we can. The disease has advanced too far. Her organs are shutting down one by one." Victoria's voice trembled, yet it was edged with command. "There must be anything you can do. You created half the drugs on the market. How can my own company's research not save my child?" Dr. Price hesitated, his jaw tightening. "There is an experimental formula in development," he admitted quietly, "but it's still in trial phase. Using it now would violate federal law." "I'm sorry. Even you can't approve this." The words hit her like a hammer. For the first time in her career, power meant nothing. Outside, under the cold neon lights of the emergency entrance, a 12-year-old boy huddled beneath a torn raincoat. Marcus Hill had no home, no parents, no reason to be near the hospital, except for the warm air that escaped through its vents and the faint hope that someone inside might toss out leftover food. His shoes were soaked, his stomach empty, but his eyes stayed fixed on the building as if it were something sacred. Security guards had already chased him off twice that week, calling him names, threatening him with the police. Still, he lingered in the shadows, drawn by something he couldn't explain. When lightning flashed across the sky, Marcus glanced up and saw her. Through the third-floor window, a pale little girl stared blankly at the ceiling, her face barely visible between the wires and tubes. Her eyes fluttered weakly, full of pain and confusion. She looked trapped, fragile, yet impossibly calm, as though she had already made peace with something the rest of the world refused to accept. In that single moment, Marcus felt his heart twist. He had seen suffering before, but never like this. This wasn't the look of a dying body. It was the silent cry of a soul that had already been forgotten. He stepped closer, pressing his hands against the cold glass doors, but the guards were quick to spot him. "Hey, get away from there!" one barked, storming toward him. Marcus backed off, holding up his hands, but his eyes stayed locked on the window. Inside, the girl's gaze met his just for a heartbeat. It was faint, almost like a dream, but it stopped him cold. In her tired eyes, Marcus didn't see pity. He saw recognition, as if she somehow knew him, as if their pain came from the same place. Two strangers, two worlds apart, yet both prisoners of circumstance. Upstairs, Victoria's voice broke through the silence. "You're telling me my daughter has one day left and you expect me to just—" "Wait!" she demanded. Dr. Price turned away from her, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes medicine fails us. You should spend your remaining hours with her." The words sounded cruel, but they were the truth he was willing to offer. Victoria sat down beside Emily's bed, brushing the girl's hair from her forehead. Emily's skin was hot, her breathing shallow. "Mommy," she whispered weakly, "it hurts." Victoria's composure shattered. "I know, baby. I know." For the first time, the woman who commanded boardrooms and broke billion-dollar deals found herself powerless. Meanwhile, Marcus lingered in the rain long after the guards left, He sat on the curb, staring up at the window where the girl's light now dimmed behind drawn curtains. He didn't know her name, her story, or her illness, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to see her. His grandmother used to say that sometimes souls call out for help in ways words never can. Marcus had laughed at that once. Now he wasn't so sure. The streets had hardened him, made him numb to most things. But something about that hospital window made him feel again. Made him remember that not all battles were fought with fists or hunger. Some were fought quietly between the living and the dying. Inside, Victoria stayed by her daughter's side through the night. Every hour, Dr. Price returned with more bad news dressed in clinical language. Every minute, Emily's life slipped further away. When dawn approached, Victoria stood by the window, looking out at the dark streets below. She didn't know that Marcus was still there, huddled near the gate, his small figure almost swallowed by the rain. She couldn't hear the faint whisper that left his lips. "Don't give up." But something about the air in that room shifted. The same moment the girl's eyelids flickered open again, as if responding to a voice the world didn't hear. In another life, they would never have met. But fate had already drawn an invisible thread between the billionaire's daughter and the boy with nothing to his name, a bond born not of chance but of purpose. And though neither of them knew it yet, that single moment, a glance through rain-streaked glass, had just set in motion a chain of events that would expose lies buried deep beneath white coats and prove that hope can come from the unlikeliest places. The night deepened around St. Matthew's Medical Center, the rain finally giving way to a heavy silence that seemed to press down on the glass walls. Inside, the doctors and nurses moved like ghosts, efficient, detached, repeating the same tired explanations about protocols and test results. But for one boy standing in the shadows outside, every passing hour meant something different. Marcus Hill wasn't just watching anymore. He was listening. Hunger had taught him to be invisible, and the streets had trained his ears to catch what others missed. That night, crouched behind the loading dock, he overheard two nurses talking during their smoke break, voices low, careless, the kind that spoke truth only when no one was supposed to hear. "I told them they should have checked her liver first," one said, flicking ash into the wet pavement. "But no, Dr. Price doesn't make mistakes, right?" The other laughed bitterly. "That experimental cocktail's too strong. If the kid's liver's weak, it'll kill her faster than the disease." The words hit Marcus like a jolt of electricity. He didn't fully understand the science, but he recognized the warning in their tone. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, soft yet certain. When the liver is burdened, even medicine becomes poison. Miss Lila had been a healer in their old neighborhood, a woman everyone came to when hospitals turned them away. She'd taught Marcus to read the signs of imbalance, the skin's dull tone, the eyes losing their light. And now, remembering Emily's pale face through the hospital window, he realized what he had just overheard wasn't gossip. It was a clue. Inside, Victoria Langford sat beside her daughter's bed, her mind unraveling thread by thread. Emily's breathing had grown ragged, her lips moving weakly as she whispered to someone who wasn't there. "The boy with kind eyes," she murmured, reaching into the air as if trying to touch something unseen. The nurse on duty looked confused, glancing at Dr. Price. "Delusions," he said curtly, jotting notes without looking up. "Common in late-stage decline," but Victoria felt a chill crawl up her spine. She didn't know any boy with kind eyes, yet when she turned toward the window, she half expected to see that shadowy figure again. This time, the rain-slick glass reflected only her own haunted face. While the hospital buzzed with sterile light and silent despair, Marcus searched for answers in the only place he could reach, the therapy garden that wrapped around the hospital's lower wing. The garden was meant for patients to find peace, but to him it was a living memory of his grandmother's teachings. He knelt in the dirt, running his fingers across leaves he recognized from her backyard. Dandelion root, milk thistle, chamomile, all plants Miss Lila had used in her homemade remedies to help cleanse the liver and restore balance. He didn't know how, but somewhere deep inside, he felt that Emily's life depended on what he was remembering now. He wasn't alone for long. A soft voice startled him from behind. "You shouldn't be here," said Elena Morales, the night janitor, pushing her mop bucket quietly over the stone path. She was in her 50s, her uniform faded, eyes tired but kind. Marcus froze, unsure whether to run or explain. "I'm not stealing," he said quickly. "I'm trying to help someone." There was something in his tone, earnest, desperate, that made Elena pause. When he mentioned the girl upstairs and the medicine that might be killing her, Elena didn't laugh. She just sighed, setting her mop aside. "I've worked here 15 years, she said softly. "I've seen doctors play God and lose. Pride's a sickness too, mijo." For the first time in days, Marcus felt someone believed him. Elena thought for a long moment before saying, "There's one doctor who might listen. Dr. Grace Lee. She's not like the others. She still remembers why she became one." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Can you help me talk to her?" Elena nodded slowly. "If anyone will hear you, it's her." At 2 in the morning, the cafeteria was almost empty, just humming refrigerators, flickering lights, and the faint scent of burnt coffee. Marcus sat nervously at a corner table, clutching his worn notebook, the one filled with his grandmother's handwritten notes about plants, pulse rhythms, and body balance. When Dr. Grace Lee arrived, she stopped short, surprised to see a child waiting for her. "Elena said you needed to speak to me?" she asked, her tone cautious but gentle. Marcus nodded, sliding the notebook across the table. "It's about the girl upstairs," he began. "They gave her the wrong treatment." At first, Dr. Lee assumed he was confused, a street kid repeating something he didn't understand. But as Marcus spoke, her expression changed. He talked about liver toxicity, about how certain chemicals couldn't process when the organ was weak, and how herbal compounds could sometimes help the body recover. His explanations weren't perfect, but his reasoning was clear and shockingly intuitive. She flipped through the notebook, her brows furrowing deeper with every page of neatly scribbled formulas and herbal sketches. "Where did you learn this?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled faintly. "My grandma. She healed people who couldn't afford hospitals. She said medicine isn't about power, it's about listening to the body." Something in those words hit Dr. Lee harder than any medical lecture ever had. For years, she'd questioned the system she worked in, the hierarchy, the greed, the blind loyalty to procedure. But she had never seen that kind of conviction in anyone, least of all a child. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said. "If you're right, that medicine could be poisoning her instead of helping. I'll check her charts myself." Marcus's shoulders eased for the first time all night. "Thank you," he whispered. But their moment of quiet alliance didn't last. Unbeknownst to them, in a dim control room down the hall, a red light blinked on one of the security monitors. Dr. Samuel Price had installed surveillance cameras throughout the facility, part of his obsession with control. And as the screen showed a young boy and a pediatrician talking secretly in the cafeteria, his expression hardened. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Who are you, kid?" he muttered under his breath, rewinding the footage. The boy's face came into focus. Wet hair, tired eyes, determination burning beneath it all. Dr. Price didn't know it yet, but the walls he built to protect his secrets were about to crack, one truth at a time. Morning light crept through the hospital blinds, cold and sterile, touching every corner of St. Matthew's Medical Center except the one where truth was hiding. Dr. Samuel Price hadn't slept a moment. The entire night, his eyes stayed fixed on the flickering monitor in his office, replaying the same scene. Marcus Hill sitting with Dr. Grace Lee in the cafeteria, their voices hushed, their faces serious. The boy had broken through the hospital's walls like a ghost slipping through the cracks. And worse, he'd spoken to Grace, the one doctor whose compassion always threatened Price's control. By sunrise, fury had replaced fear. He burst through the cafeteria doors, flanked by 2 security guards, his voice echoing across the room. "This boy is trespassing," he barked, pointing at Marcus, who sat quietly at a corner table with his tattered notebook open. "He's stealing patient data and interfering with hospital operations." The guards moved forward, ready to grab the boy, but Marcus didn't flinch. His face was calm, steady. Too steady for a 12-year-old. He looked straight at Dr. Price and said, "Before you throw me out, maybe Mrs. Langford should hear this." From his pocket, Marcus pulled out an old, cracked phone. With a single tap, the cafeteria filled with the sound of Dr. Price's voice, crisp and unmistakable. "Miss Langford is our most important test case. We're not changing the dosage even if she gets worse. We need consistent data." The words echoed through the room, bouncing off the metal tables and sterile walls. Dr. Price froze mid-step, his face turning as pale as the floor beneath him. The nurses nearby exchanged startled glances. Even the guards hesitated, unsure whether to follow orders or back away. Dr. Grace Lee's expression darkened. "You recorded him?" she whispered. Marcus nodded. "Last night in the security office hallway, he was talking on the phone. For a moment, everything was still, until Dr. Lee's phone buzzed violently in her hand. She answered, and her face drained of color. "It's Emily," she gasped. "She's crashing," chaos erupted. Alarms screamed through the halls, red lights flashing in rhythmic bursts that painted every face with panic. On the third floor, doctors rushed around Emily Langford's room as her small body convulsed under the restraints. Victoria stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she tried to touch her daughter's arm. "What's happening to my daughter?" she cried, her voice raw with terror. Dr. Price stormed in, already wearing his mask of authority. "It's a normal reaction," he said sharply. "Her body's under stress. It's part of the treatment cycle." But his words didn't match the fear in his eyes. Marcus appeared in the doorway, breathless from running up the stairs, his clothes soaked from the drizzle outside. The guards had tried to stop him, but the chaos of the emergency gave him a path. He took a step forward, his voice trembling but clear. "Mrs. Langford," he said softly, "your daughter isn't dying from her illness. The treatment is poisoning her." The room fell silent, the only sound the shrill alarm and Emily's labored breaths. Victoria turned sharply, disbelief flooding her face. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Before Marcus could answer, Dr. Lee stepped in, her voice steady and certain. "He's telling the truth," she said. I checked her charts. "Her liver enzymes are through the roof. Her organs are shutting down because of the drug. The dosage should have been reduced days ago." Dr. Price's composure cracked. His voice rose, trembling with rage. "You're not qualified to interpret those tests, Grace. You're letting a street boy manipulate you. This is years of research, millions in investment. You have no idea what's at stake." His words spilled out like venom, but no one was listening anymore. Victoria's gaze was fixed on her daughter, her little girl gasping for breath while monitors screamed that her body was losing the fight. Marcus didn't argue. He simply lifted his phone again. "There's more," he said quietly. Then, pressing play, another recording filled the room. This time, Dr. Price's voice carried something colder than arrogance. It carried intent. "If the Langford girl doesn't make it, we'll classify her as an anomaly. We'll adjust the data and move forward with Phase 3. No one will question it." The silence that followed was suffocating. The nurses froze in place. One of the guards lowered his head. Even the machines seemed to hum more softly, as if absorbing the weight of what had just been revealed. Victoria stared at Dr. Price, her lips trembling. "You were willing to let my daughter die? For your experiment?" Her voice was no longer that of a grieving mother. It was steel, sharpened by betrayal. Dr. Price opened his mouth to defend himself, but the words died before they could form. The guards, now unwilling to meet his gaze, moved toward him. "Get him out," Victoria said, her tone cutting through the room like glass. As they grabbed his arms, Dr. Price struggled, shouting threats about lawsuits and board inquiries. "You'll regret this. You don't understand what we're building here." But his voice grew smaller with every step toward the door, swallowed by the sound of his own empire crumbling. When he was gone, Victoria turned to Dr. Lee and Marcus, her eyes red but fierce. "Can you save her?" she asked. Dr. Lee hesitated, glancing at the monitors. "If we can stop the toxicity, maybe." Without waiting for permission, Marcus opened his notebook and pointed to a page filled with handwritten notes and herbal sketches. "We have to detox her liver first," he said. "That's what's killing her. I can show you how." Dr. Lee studied the notes, her professional instincts warring with disbelief. But there was no time for doubt. She nodded once. "Let's do it." In that moment, titles and status meant nothing. Doctor, heiress, orphan, they were all just people fighting for one fragile heartbeat. The lies of power had been stripped away, leaving only truth and desperation. As the security doors closed behind Dr. Price, the storm outside broke again, thunder shaking the windows of the glass tower. Inside, 3 strangers stood together over a dying child, bound not by science or wealth, but by courage, the kind that dares to face what others fear to see. Under Dr. Lee's careful supervision, and with Marcus's quiet yet confident guidance, the hospital room transformed from a place of fear into a space of hope. The machines that had once beeped frantically now hummed with rhythm. The toxic medication was stopped immediately, and Marcus began guiding Dr. Lee through a detox plan based on his grandmother, Miss Lila's remedies. They used activated charcoal, herbal teas made from milk thistle and dandelion, and natural hydration to cleanse Emily's system. At first, the doctors watching from the glass window whispered that it was nonsense. But slowly, as the hours passed, science and spirit began to work hand in hand. Within 6 hours, Emily's raging fever subsided. Within 12, her pulse, once faint and erratic, grew strong and steady. Within 24, her eyes fluttered open, and she looked toward her mother. Her dry lips parted, and in a soft, fragile voice, she whispered, "Mommy." Victoria's legs gave out beneath her. She sank to the floor, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The woman who had everything, power, money, reputation, realized that none of it had saved her daughter. It was the heart of a poor boy, one who had listened more than he spoke, that had brought Emily back from the edge. She clutched Marcus's hand, trembling. "You saved my child," she whispered, barely able to breathe the words. Marcus smiled shyly and shook his head. "No, ma'am. Your daughter saved herself. I just helped her body remember how." By dawn, the story had already started spreading through the hospital. Nurses whispered. Interns texted each other. One of the guards, who had dragged Marcus out the day before, now stood at the doorway watching him in awe. Then came the first call from the press. By noon, every major network had picked it up. Street kid exposes billion-dollar hospital cover-up. The news anchor's voice echoed across waiting rooms and offices nationwide. Hidden recordings recovered from Marcus's phone revealed years of falsified research and unethical human testing under Dr. Price's supervision. His once proud reputation shattered overnight. He was stripped of his medical license and escorted from the hospital under police watch. His face pale, his arrogance finally broken. As reporters swarmed the hospital grounds, Dr. Lee protected Marcus, refusing to let the media turn him into a spectacle. "He's not a miracle," she told them. "He's a reminder." Yet word of his courage inspired millions. Online petitions flooded in, demanding reform in medical ethics. And in a twist no one could have imagined, Victoria Langford, once a patient's mother, became Marcus's greatest supporter. She invited him and Dr. Lee to her estate and announced she would fund a new medical initiative in her daughter's name, the Langford Center for Integrative Healing. It would be the first hospital wing in the country to merge ancestral healing with modern science. Months later, Marcus returned to St. Matthew's Hospital, but this time not as the lost boy who wandered the halls at night. The brass nameplate outside the research department now read, Marcus Hill, Consultant of Integrative Medicine. He was 12 years old, the youngest medical researcher in U.S. history. His notebook, once dismissed as childish scribbles, was now being studied by doctors from around the world. His calm presence reminded everyone that medicine wasn't just about test results or prescriptions. It was about humanity. In a small gray apartment across town, Dr. Price sat alone, watching the news. His hands shook as he filled out unemployment papers. On the television, Marcus spoke with quiet conviction during a live interview. His voice was calm, sincere, far wiser than his age. "True medicine isn't about wealth or titles," he said. "It's about compassion and the courage to learn from those the world ignores." The words struck like a pulse of light, cutting through the noise of ego and greed that had clouded modern medicine for so long. Victoria and Emily appeared beside him on screen. Emily, now healthy, wore a sunflower dress and held a tiny notebook that Marcus had gifted her. "This is for your own discoveries," he had told her. "Write what you learn from people, not just from books." Victoria smiled with pride and gratitude, holding her daughter close. The Langford Foundation, reborn from tragedy, began funding scholarships for underprivileged children, kids who had knowledge, curiosity, and heart, but no access to fancy schools. For every dollar donated, a promise was made. No child's wisdom would ever be ignored again. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus stood in the hospital garden. The same herbs his grandmother once used swayed gently in the breeze. He opened his grandmother's old notebook, its pages now weathered but alive with history, and whispered, "We did it, Grandma." In that quiet moment, it was as if Miss Lila's spirit lingered in the air, warm, proud, and smiling. The hospital that once silenced truth had now become a sanctuary of learning and compassion. Patients from around the world came not only for treatment, but for understanding. Doctors began their rounds with a new oath: to listen, to respect, and to remember that knowledge has no class, no race, no boundary. And as Marcus walked down the gleaming hallway, past the portraits of men who had once ruled medicine with arrogance, his reflection appeared beneath them, young, humble, and radiant with purpose. A child who changed the meaning of healing, forever guided by love, courage, and the memory of a grandmother who believed that every soul, no matter how small, carried the power to heal the world.